Hello, everyone. This is Emily Burley, President of ELS. Welcome to today's ELSX, and thank you for joining us. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with ELS, it is a community that brings together executive assistants supporting the world's most influential leaders. We cultivate professional development by providing a platform for EAs to connect and collaborate and really contribute solutions to their greatest challenges. We're also the creator of the ELS Forum. It is a professional development course for executive assistants, and we hold the forum in 28 cities worldwide. And at the forum, attendees gain support and training and inspiration from world-renowned instructors and their peers to really discover a renewed sense of purpose and passion in their career. If you're interested in attending a forum, you can find out more information at elsforum.com. Today, we are thrilled to partner with Monique Hellstrom to discuss the topic of going beyond checking the box, becoming an indispensable business partner. There will be an opportunity to get your questions answered at the end of the webinar. So please submit your questions at any time via the questions tab on your webinar toolbar, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. Today's webinar will not be recorded. However, you can download a copy of the slides, and that is underneath the handout tab, also on the webinar toolbar. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our guest speaker for today, Monique Hellstrom, the former executive assistant to New York Times bestselling author and TED celebrity, Simon Sinek. Monique now shares her passion, experience, and perspective with executives and assistants, helping them each understand the importance of their own contributions. It is now my pleasure to hand it over to Monique.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, ELS, for having me on. I'm very honored to be a part of this community, very honored to share information with you all today. Many of you may be in some transition or career change at the moment. I did have a few people reach out and tell me that they were in a transition at the moment, and my career is evolving as well. In 2 days, I am moving on from being the chief of Simon for the past almost decade, starting my own business, helping this amazing group of supporters, executive assistants, admins, logistics, sort of all of us. We are the forgotten group of people who make this world go round. So very dedicated to helping us stand tall and confident and be the best versions of ourselves, both in speaking and in training. Also starting a training program for executives on how to build a powerful partnership with their EAs. So hopefully this will help those in transition and those not in transition be the best versions of themselves. So let's take it away. Today we're going to discuss the performance loop. What is the performance loop? So you are given a task, you perform the task, you communicate the completion of said task with your executive, briefly pausing for some semblance of a recognition, then you move on to the next task and the next task and the next. You're churning out tasks, you're checking off the boxes, but all the while you're not feeling very fulfilled, you're not feeling like you're actually contributing to the bigger picture, certainly not feeling valued or valuable, and definitely not feeling like an indispensable business partner. So the question is, how do we let go of this dopamine-based loop and find deeper development within ourselves, providing deeper benefits for our executive at the same time? So I'm going to start with a story. When I was little, my mom had the star chart. Some of you may be smiling because you either remember this from when you were a kid or you currently use this little wonderful bribery tactic. The purpose of this sticker chart is to encourage behavior you want, discourage behavior that you don't want, and reward the effort of practicing a new skill. Without a doubt, it was the best way to get me to do anything when I was a child, was to tell me that I would get one of those delicious little gold star stickers. It was so much more than a sticker to me. It was a shiny metallic representation of all of my hard work and my effort. gleaming on the refrigerator for everyone in the household to see. And at the end of a very long and turbulent work week for a 5-year-old child, I'd be able to go get my 25-cent bouncy ball out of the gumball machine, or sometimes it would be a really big toy like a Slinky. I think I'm showing my age as I just said that out loud. Some of you may not know what a Slinky is, but it was a big toy when I was a kid. At this tender young age, I probably would have done just about anything to get a sticker on my chart. I would do my star-worthy chores before I did my homework. I would trample all over my sister's sticker board and do her tasks before she could get to them. I did not often cheat, but every once in a while, when the reward was just so good, like a trip to a Chuck E. Cheese or something like that, I'd definitely find a way to get a leg up on the sticker business. So what was it about this silly sticker that appealed to me so much? Well, it was immediate gratification. It was very visual. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is my favorite. It was a cadence I could rely on. It had a 1-to-1 ratio. In my young brain, one good deed equals 1 star. Now, granted, one good deed could have been cleaning up my entire room, not necessarily 1-to-1, but in my young brain, it had a 1-to-1 ratio. Hard work equals more stars equals more rewards. Again, this is a cadence I could get used to. And of course, it was dopamine central. And while I could honestly be totally behind any executive keeping a star chart for their executives or their assistants, it's not terribly realistic. I get that. Can you imagine every time you do something, you get a gold star? There is just not a chart big enough for all of us to have all of our stars. So let's start at the beginning again. In the beginning, you are the receiver of tasks. And this performance loop is the way you will operate from anywhere from 0 to 3 years, depending on your industry and depending on your executive. And that is perfectly okay. The loop is the foundation that you will build every process, system, and upgrade upon. Your job for these first few years, months, whatever it might take, is to shut up and listen and loop. Loop your brains out. Task your brains out. It is the time that the accomplishment of the task is more significant than the caring about the person. And that is totally okay. You don't have all of the information yet. This is a great time to absorb everything that you're hearing. This is the time to make connections between people, projects, processes. This is the time to identify patterns that you see within the workplace. And our favorite, detect your SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I do this a lot. This shows that you are capable of following directions and multitasking, which are 2 amazing traits of an indispensable business partner, EA, what I will refer to as the unicorn. This is the grind. This is the hard work. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. That quote was attributed to a number of people before 1930s. I think Vince Lombardi is also tasked with this quote, but I just found it to be hysterical that Vidal Sassoon actually said this as well, so I wanted to use him as my example. At some point, it will be time to move beyond this loop. This is when you are ready, when your executive is ready, when the business is ready, and only you will know when it's time to move past the loop. When you're ready, it's the time to find the human behind the task. The more you get to know the person giving you the tasks, the more you'll be able to identify what they really need instead of what they ask you to do. We all know that that's not always the same thing. And we sometimes forget that there is a human behind that great and powerful Oz, right? We forget that the calendar is not just square boxes. It's someone's life. We forget that it's really just a dad trying to get home to his kids not a crazy rigid travel schedule. It is so much more. It is recognizing the human over the performance, over the task. And at the end of the day, what we do is extremely human. So here are some strategies to finding the human. Be a spy. Figure out how your executive works best. When do you get the best answers from them? When are they most engaged or task oriented? Are they a morning person or are they an afternoon person? What questions do they ask you repeatedly? Is she the kind of person who word vomits right away, or does she usually need more time to process and think before responding? You take that knowledge to anticipate and prepare. Two more traits of a unicorn executive assistant. For example, you could learn that your executive is not a morning person. So maybe you rearrange the travel schedule so that your catch-up meetings are just after lunch instead of 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. You could also see that maybe your executive does tend to word vomit throughout the day and say things that are incomplete, or maybe they don't make sense and they're little bite-sized pieces. And maybe she thinks out loud a lot. So instead of bombarding her when she does that with these tiny little individual paper cuts of questions, maybe you just wait until the end of the day to summarize everything you heard that day and ask the relevant questions that you didn't have time, that you need answered for that day. Be a spy. Notice when he or she does what he or she does when in times of stress and in times of ease. What they do when they're in those situations. What do they do? What motivates them? Stress acting is way easier to pinpoint than when everything is in flow. I totally get that. It is way easier to realize and recognize the behaviors that happen when someone is under stress. They're usually very visual and very vivid. It's much more difficult to realize the behaviors that happen when you're in times of peace, in times of ease, in times of flow. But watching those clues while you're in flow is just as helpful when you're in times of stress. For example, you could see that your executive, whenever he is feeling out of control, maybe he focuses on what he can control. And sometimes that is the details. And you'll be like, he is just consistently getting all up in my business. What is that? And then you recognize the pattern that this is when he's in times of stress. You put that file up in your file box, in your mental file box, and that is a very good data point for you to recognize in the future. And the same thing happens with peace behaviors. You could notice when your executive takes time out to work out in the morning, that she flows through the day with more positive energy and has more energy throughout the day. So maybe you remember not to schedule anything before 9:30 to allow for this to happen. This is very mutually beneficial, by the way, having these tactics when it's times of peace. Again, go back to that sticker chart. What did that do? It encouraged the behaviors that you want and discouraged the behaviors that you don't want. So when you're in times of peace and when you're in times of ease, you can use some of those behaviors that you see and anticipate, prepare, and encourage those behaviors to happen more. Invest some time. Invest time in spending more time together. And tell them why, obviously. Tell them this is how you're going to get to know each other. Call it research. Call it whatever you want, but make sure you tell them why you will be investing so much time in spending time together. This could be listening in on meetings, phone calls, conversations, whatever it may be, and extracting the things that you can do to lighten their load. And at the end of the call, proact and say, from what I heard, I'm going to handle this, this, and this. So make sure you take this and this off your plate. Listening in on meetings or calls, and that's how you can invest the time. Regardless of how many times You ask for help or clarification in a given week, double it for the next 30 days. Even if it's a seemingly easy answer, you learn a lot from asking questions, not surprisingly. Focus on where you're sourcing yourself from. If you're sourcing yourself from empathy and sheer curiosity, the communication will follow. Make sure you're sourcing yourself from a place of curiosity, not from a place of proving, disproving, or trying to show how much you know. Know your offensive and your defensive teams. Similar to your executive, you have to know what motivates the other people in your department, in your company, in your team, whatever it may be. You need to know where they're coming from as well. What are their goals? This information gathering will help you in so many ways throughout your career. There's so much juicy information in there. You will be like a walking encyclopedia. Identify these people on your offensive and defensive teams. I say offensive teams are those that have your same goals, priorities, and game plan in mind. They move in the same direction as you and your executive. The defensive team still plays on the same team as you, but they don't necessarily have the same goals in mind. The game does have to be played with both teams, so make sure you get to know both sides. At the end of the next few weeks, have a 5-minute feedback session at the end of the week where you both discuss what I like to say, what sucked and what sucked less. It is an honest conversation of just that. What sucked this week? What did not go well? What did not go well for you? What did not go well for her? What could be improved for you? What could be improved for her? Then you talk about what sucked less. So what did work this week? What did feel good? And take notes. Having both of you communicate this to each other opens the possibilities for both of you to reward the behaviors that you want to see. Now, you may have the confidence to start doing some small, innocuous things on your own without confirming. Take some small risks, such as ordering lunch without asking what they want, or making reservations for a place that you found on Yelp without getting confirmation. And then keep asking for feedback. Why did you like one restaurant over another? Why did you like this place over that place? Oh, it was the noise factor. Got it. You take notes on that. You file that away in your memory box so you know when he's having a conversation with board members, he wants to be in a place that's quiet. Last and absolutely not least, one of my soapboxes, communication, communication, communication. I am an over communicator, and I do talk about communication all the time. So if you've heard me speak, you're going to hear this. Again, I will always talk about the importance of communication. I'm going to break it out just a little bit more on our following slide. In the beginning, communication is difficult because you don't know what the rules are. And there's this push and this pull and this dance that you do to learn about each other and about each other's communication styles. It's you step forward and you keep over communicating, and then you realize it was maybe too much, so you pull back a little bit. It's just like what happens when you're dating. There are many different communication styles, and while I definitely think that my way is the right way, guess what? It is not the right way. One way of communicating is not the right way. First, invest some time in finding out about your communication style and your listening style. This has helped me so much in my life, way beyond work. This has helped me with my personal relationships, with my family, with my friends, and at work. If your exec is up to it, I'd have them take the same tests and do the same things. I am a big fan of strengths finders. I am obviously a big fan of finding your why. There are about 200 other tests you can take on the internet that will show you what your communication style is and what your listening style is. There's a few listed there, but I highly recommend taking these tests and reading the results. You could take 100 of them if you so desire. These are all just data points that help you grow and help your communication with your executive. If you don't understand something, ask for clarification. If you need background, ask for it. This is a big, hairy place for victimization to creep in. And you can easily say, well, she didn't give me all the information that I need, so it's not my fault. Actually, it is your fault. You are not allowed to live through your perceptions. You live in a fact-based world. You are not allowed to only live through your perceptions. So if you don't know information that you need, if you don't ask, it is your fault. Offer solutions, not just problems. And involve your executive in this problem solving if need be. One of my absolute favorite lines is, "Let me tell you the problem I am trying to solve." Then you present the problem, followed by a few solutions. Offering only problems with no solution is something reserved only for people under the age of 8, and that's called whining. Dumping a pile of you-know-what on your executive's desk without offering a single solution does not say, "I know how to problem solve," which is yet another trait of a unicorn assistant. Hit your most important points first, in case your chat does get short. I say that in case we all know that our conversations with our executives get cut short. And sometimes you have to get a day's worth of information out in 2.5 minutes. Be concise. Imagine that there's a fire alarm going off and you only have one sentence. What will that sentence be? Make sure that you mention the payoff. This always helps when talking to your executive. What is the payoff of XYZ getting done? Is it saving money? Is it saving time? Whatever that could be. Be concise. Most of us hear things through a filter of how does this relate to me? So deliver that answer up front to him or her. Now, if you've heard me speak before, this is so worth repeating. I took a communications class and I learned a technique called FBI. It's a conversation starter to help invite others to change. That's what they call it. This works for hard conversations. This works for feedback. This works for expressing concern or confrontation. I know the word confrontation has an extremely bad rap these days. But again, confrontation is all about where you're sourcing yourself from. If it's from trying to be right, yes, confrontation can be messy and scary and awkward and uncomfortable. But if you're sourcing yourself from curiosity, from empathy, from sympathy, from wanting to be a friend, confrontation can be a very special and magical thing for your relationship, both in your personal life and in your professional life. So an FBI, what is an FBI? It's a few sentences that will include a feeling. This is a primary feeling and below the surface feeling. I will go through what this means again. A behavior, a specific behavior and a non-judgmental behavior, and an impact, direct and personal impact. So let me give you an example and then I'll go through this again. This is an FBI that I used with a friend of mine. She was the kind of girl who, whenever you told her a story about something that happened, she told you a story about what happened to her that was worse or better or more heartbreaking or more romantic or whatever it was. I call these people the eclipsers. It's like the moon telling the sun, "I really don't care what you do, sun. I'm shutting you down." That's what an eclipser is, the eclipser friend. So I sat down with her and I told her, last week, when I tried to tell you the story about how my aunt was in the hospital, after less than 1 minute, you immediately chimed in with your own story of your aunt about when she was sick, And we spent the entire conversation talking about your situation from 4 years ago. I really needed to talk, and I really needed you to listen. When you overtook me, it made me feel unimportant and unrecognized, and that my hurt wasn't important as your hurt. And my fear is, if this keeps happening, I'm not going to want to tell you how I feel for fear that I'm going to be cannibalized at the end of the conversation. I'm going to resent the fact that I can't tell you about my life. And our friendship will eventually suffer for it. And you just mean too much for me to let that happen. And then you shut up. You don't keep talking. You let her respond. She was bitter at first, understandably so, but then she understood. Because no one can argue or deny how you're feeling. Your feelings are valid and your feelings are important. This technique is a game changer. So let me recap. I started with the behavior in this specific example. So the behavior has to be specific and non-judgmental. I said last week when I tried to tell you about how my aunt was in the hospital, it's a specific behavior and non-judgmental. So instead of saying, you're always late, that is not specific and that is quite judgmental. Specifically talk about a time last Tuesday when I told you I really needed you for a solid hour and you were 45 minutes late. Make it specific. Then talk about your feelings. These are your primary feelings that happen when the behavior happened to you. And these are below the surface. Grab a thesaurus. Don't use happy, sad, glad, annoyed. These are words that we hear all the time and they flow right out of our heads. Grab a thesaurus, find some really juicy words that describe what you're going through and the feelings that you had. And then the impact. This is the direct impact from the behavior, from the feeling, and it must be personal. My fear is if this keeps happening, I'm not going to want to tell you how I feel because I'll feel I'll be cannibalized at the end of the conversation and our friendship will eventually suffer for it. It is my personal and direct impact. This has helped me so much, again, in my life. I can't even explain how often I use these. And you practice and you practice and you practice. And sometimes I give FBIs and I don't even know that I'm doing it. But it's a great way, again, to communicate, whether it be a hard conversation, feedback, concern, that scary word, confrontation. This is a very good way to approach. So let me summarize. When you find the human behind the task, what will happen is you will begin to feel a sense that your value is outweighing the need for your validation. Value is within yourself. Validation is external. And when you can truly embrace the humanness of this position and the humanness of your executives, you can more easily appreciate that it's not just a transaction. The task becomes deeper, it becomes wider, it becomes more thoughtful. You will feel fulfilled because you can help him in a way that no one else could help him. Helping someone feel seen and heard is one of the most important things you can do for an individual, including your executive. We all want to be seen and heard, so offer it. To be a leader, this is one of the most important things you can do for any human in your office. And what helps him feel more human will make you feel more human, which helps us all feel more human. I feel like I'm Oprah. I'm giving away a car, and you get a car, you get a car. What makes him feel more human will help you feel more human, which makes all of us feel more human. And isn't that what human nature is all about? This also allows us to tap into yet another unique contribution that no one else is giving him, and a way to make progress in a way that makes you and others feel fulfilled. All of this will bring you closer to becoming an indispensable business partner. Now my next section, section 2 or step 2, context. There are only two things in this world: content and context. Content is the stuff we do. It's the box we check, but it has no meaning without context. Context is what gives meaning to the content by identifying its purpose. Content is all about having the complexity to manage huge, enormous amounts of information. Context is about leadership. It's about creating simplicity of information. We are masters of complexity, which is why we're asked to fill this role. This is one of the reasons we are good at our job. But when you want to take this to the next level, it is about taking in the context and creating simplicity. Leonardo da Vinci said, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." I actually have that quote on my wall. I love that quote. I use this example a lot about jigsaw puzzle pieces, but the individual piece of a jigsaw puzzle doesn't mean anything until we see the picture on the puzzle box. Once we see the goal, then the individual pieces come together more coherently and with more meaning. And the more pieces you put down, the more vibrant your picture becomes. And one puzzle piece is just that. It's a right corner of a flag or the top of a tree. It's just one puzzle piece. But without the picture on the box, do you know what you're truly building? Are you building one tree, or are you building a forest? Are you building the flag of your country, or are you building a pirate flag? Without the North Star, this picture, it takes more time and energy and frustration and likely way more errors to get done what you need to get done. For example, an example of asking for context, when your executive could ask you to go to the library to get a book out about Martin Luther King. Sure, anyone can do that. You can go to the library and get a book out about Martin Luther King. But if you ask him, why do you need this book? Maybe they'll say, well, I'm about to write a blog about those in history who have commanded large followings of people. Well, then you know the context behind it. You know the picture on the puzzle box. You know the goal. Then you could go and not only get a book out about Martin Luther King, but you might get a book out about Genghis Khan or even Hitler, because both of them have commanded large followings of people, and you can go deeper. Speaking of, content goes deep about one particular item. It's digging one big hole in one area on one topic. It's planting one flower with one purpose. This can be useful. I'm not downgrading the content by saying it's not helpful. Sometimes you need to just go deep and not go wide, which is what context does. It's about seeing the beginning, the middle, the end, and planning ahead. It's about planting a garden. So here's some more strategies on how to find context. Ask tons of questions. Again, yes, I know I've already said it, but ask tons of questions. Preface by you telling your executive why you're asking him or her tons of questions. Why was one decision made over another? Why was one priority over another? What is the goal of the project? The goal of the partnership? The goal of the business? What are the priorities? Make sure you confirm and reconfirm and triple confirm the priorities and strategies of your executive for getting there. If you don't know, ask it again. Put them on the wall. Refer to it. Make it visual. You prioritize based on his priorities. So if you are not clear, this again comes down on you. A side note to this, I get asked often in Q&A sessions how to go about reminding your executive of their priorities, since apparently most executives tend to change them on a weekly basis or forget about the priorities that they mentioned to you the week before. Yes, I can feel you nodding on the other end. There are a few ways to go about this, whichever serves you and your office and your relationship with your executive best. I personally used to have it very visually printed out. And when we would start discussing things, I would actually pull this piece of paper out and say things like, I hear what you're saying is that what's important for you to get done this week is this task instead of that other task. You had mentioned these other priorities to me last week when we talked. So if this priority that you just mentioned to me is more important, which one of these would you like me to move to next week? That is a very powerful statement. Which one of these priorities would you like me to move to next week? Because it gives him the choice to move or not to move, but it also helps him realize how many things he can actually get done in a specific week. Use your words. Once you think you're clear, you can start saying things like, based off the priorities we discussed last week, I felt it was important to blankety blank. Or since you told me the goal of this board meeting was blank, I thought it was a good idea to blank. Build off what you know. This is another unicorn trait here, prioritization. Trust what you know, source what you don't. Find the information you need to be successful. This is another unicorn trait, resourcefulness. Who are the players in the next board meeting? Research them. What do I know that is needed to travel to Saudi Arabia? Source the information that you don't know. Resourcefulness is one of the most important traits an executive assistant can have in their world. The answer to their question, any question, cannot be, I don't know. That's your job, is to figure out what you don't know. You can also start by showing that you understand the context and the priorities and the strategies by delivering back more content than what was originally asked for, and by teaching. I think it was Confucius who said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. One of the most visual ways of showing leadership is by sharing information with those around you. Dip that toe into the ocean of vulnerability there. Host a lunch and learn. Do some trainings with other support staff in your office. An example of how to deliver more information over delivering than what was asked for is the calendar. We all know how paramount that calendar is. And remember, it is their life, not just an app. Make sure the calendar is oozing of information on who, what, when, where, and why these meetings are taking place. Take some time, do some research online about some of the attendees prior to a meeting. This will help your executive relate to each of the other people in that room on a human level. This helps everyone. Your job is to be a mind reader. Your executives is not. Put yourself in their shoes and give them what you would want to know about what you know. Again, get out of victim mode. Leave that victim mentality behind. It's so easy to say, you didn't tell me to. That is such an easy way of answering, but you cannot if you want to become an indispensable business partner. Momentum. Once you have this context and you know the human, you have this wonderful thing called momentum. The more you can show that you're capable of doing small things and taking small risks, the more they may bring you on big projects. This is another unicorn trait, operate at scale. And of course, keep going. More risk-taking, little bits. When you feel more confident, under the water, as they say, or above the water, excuse me, as they say, take small, innocuous, above the water risks. Your executive has 100 things going on in their mind at all times. Many of these things give them seriously heavy boots, but there are things that with an assistant's help can become easy. Your ability to be the conduit, not the gatekeeper, not the funnel, not a barrier of all information task delegation, and logistics will make a remarkable difference in your executive stress level and your measurement of success. By both seeking the human behind the task and knowing the context, this can help you achieve this goal. Now, I want to talk now about something that is so essential to going beyond checking the box. It's what happens after the box is checked. Briefly pausing for some bleepity bleep recognition and celebration. Rarely, if ever, do we celebrate our wins. When is the last time you patted yourself on the back for being awesome? When have you high-fived yourself on your badassery? Never, probably. Okay, so how about external? Maybe right now you do need external validation more than internal validation, and that is perfectly fine. We all go through stages like that in our lives. And maybe you just need those warm and fuzzies from great job. Understandable. It's part of our human social animal makeup is the need for acceptance and recognition. But how often are you looking to your executive for validation, for recognition? And when you don't get it in the method you want, as often as you want, in the form you want it, in the moment you want it, how hurt do you get by that? Here's your truth bomb. You will never get the recognition and celebration you deserve from your executive, from your coworkers, from your authorities, or your HR person. You just won't. Stop the insanity. Trying to explain to your executive what it just took for you to book one call on her calendar is like trying to show someone who is colorblind what the color blue is. It just doesn't work. We see things differently. We speak in different languages. And so this foaming at the mouth validation that we all crave and we all desire just isn't possible at this when you're dealing with someone who sees the world in such a different light than you do. This is what it takes for us to book one call. We all know this. This is what your executive thinks it takes to book one call. It is not the same. So why would we look to someone who doesn't understand what we do, who doesn't speak in the same language, who doesn't understand our tasks, and who couldn't do what we do for all of the money in the world? Stop the insanity. It is futile, it is frustrating, and a pure waste of time. Now, that is not to say that you can't get external sources of recognition and celebration. You just need to bark up the right tree for it. Share experiences with your tribe. Look to each other. If I were to call a fellow EA and say something like, "Girl, you don't know the day that I just had. His flight was delayed 4 times, and then it finally was canceled due to the storm." That is literally all you have to say to a fellow EA, and they'll be like, "Yep, gotcha. Totally know. Hate that. Good job." Go to your peers for recognition. Go to your best friend. Go to someone who can validate you because they do know what you go through, someone who sees you. Don't isolate. When you are lonely, the tasks become your friends. The dopamine is your friend. It is there for you through the good times and the bad times. And so the loop begins. When you're in a state of loneliness, we tend to tighten. We tend to show less vulnerability. We tend to self-protect. And then we get tighter and tighter and tighter, and we isolate and we become lonely. This moves us farther and farther away from being open and able to receive the recognition that we so deserve. And this job can be lonely because we are leaders. It is because we are leaders that we tend to feel lonely, not in spite of. We are courageous. We do set the tone. And guess what? People do follow us. They look to us to see what to do in difficult situations. We need to not only be poised and informed and confident, but at the same time, be this extremely messy human that we all are, this vulnerable and fallible human. Model it. Work with dignity. I cannot stress this enough. Be the kind of person that you want to work with. Be the kind of leader you wish you had. Take care of each other. Competition, bullying, this if she wins, I fail, this mentality is dying. Thank goodness. This is going away. We are now in the all ships must rise together if we want to turn this world back around. And find ways to celebrate yourself. Say thank you to yourself. Say good job to yourself at the end of a good day. Be nice to you. Celebrate a productive day with some flowers or a spa or some yoga or some food, whatever it is that you do safely that rewards you. This is self-care. We spend so few moments of reflection and celebration and so many moments on stress and aggravation. I challenge you to switch that up for the next 40 days. When you can bring the best of yourself and your executive, then your executive can bring the best of himself or herself. When you can rise above the narrative, you're better able to show up in your life without all the cobwebs. The impact you will make on others' lives will impact your life. And of course, be the leader you wish you had. Thank you all very much for listening. I am ready for your questions.
Thank you, Monique. We have some great questions for you today, and I just encourage anybody who would like to submit a question to go ahead and do that, being the questions feature on your toolbar. So the first question I have for you today is, what suggestions would you have for those executives that are not really reciprocating the communication? So for example, maybe not responding to the questions that you ask them. You really talked about asking questions to get to know your executive better. What if they're not responding to that? Maybe they're not keeping scheduled one-on-ones that you may have with your executive. What do you suggest?
Okay, so I suggest a few things. In the, let's say your executive is not honoring the time that he or she has with you. This is something that plagues EAs all the time. I hear this question constantly. What I have done in the past and what I encourage you to do is use an FBI in that situation. When you didn't honor our meeting that we had last Thursday, it made me feel invisible. And all I am trying to do is help you be the best version of yourself and help you get 10 times more things done in a day. And my fear is when you cancel these, I won't get the information that I need in order to do my job effectively, and you won't get the information that you need in order to do your job effectively. So why don't we figure out a better way to go about having these meetings so that all ships can rise together? Or something like that. I just made that up, but that's an example of a one-on-one that you can have in order to keep this meeting. The second part of that is if you're asking and not getting the information that you need, one of the reasons could be because A, you might have not asked the real question of the real answer that you need, or B, they don't know why you need this information. It might just seem really silly to them that you're asking information about what happened at the board meeting 3 weeks ago. And they might not know why you need that, so they're not answering your question. But if you were to say, I really would love to hear about the board meeting that happened 3 weeks ago, because I want to make the next board meeting so much more spectacular and be so much more prepared. And by knowing what happened in the past, I can improve upon that. Something to that. You have to talk about why you need this information. It is our job to find it. I hope that helps.
Monique, the next question I have for you is, what advice would you have for those assistants that are supporting multiple people? So this is kind of a two-part question. The first would be, where do you start? So say you're supporting 3 or 4 people. This is a long process to get on, to get to this, kind of level with multiple people. So where do you prioritize? Do you prioritize those that maybe you have a really great relationship already and build off of that, or maybe the ones that need extra attention and work? That would be the first part. And the second part would be, any tips you have on keeping organized with preferences
Sure.
regarding multiple people?
So I personally would definitely start with the easiest first, and I don't think there is anything at all wrong with that, because when you start working with the executive that you either share personality types with, or you get along with the most, or you can relate to because they have something in common with you, it is absolutely fine and should be the person that you start with. And the reason being is that that person probably will have more empathy for what you're doing as well, and you will be able to edit and upgrade as you're going through the process. So once you start working with one person, you can be able to say, oh, when I did this thing, it didn't work out great. So when I do it with the other person, the second person that I support, I will do it better next time. I will do this, that, and the other thing. You can use it as a testing ground if you really get along with your executive. The second part, how would I go about organizing this? I would think about each of the executives as their own individual project, so to speak. I use Asana for a lot of my career, or you could use Evernote or OneNote or Trello or any of the systems that we all use in order to keep tabs on each individual human as if it was a project. So I would make a column for Susie and a column for Sam and a column for Jack. And then I would keep my notes, and I would keep writing things down in my own notes about things that I heard, things that I noticed. Jack hates tomatoes. Susie loves tomatoes. Whatever it may be that you think is going to help you, I would keep notes on that and refer to it often, and potentially link to people. You might actually recognize that 2 out of the however many people you support might be more similar than you think. Even if their personality types may not be the same, maybe they like the same way of receiving information, and you can sort of group them together. Again, these are all just data points, but I would keep notes and keep tabs on each person until it becomes memory.
Monique, we have a great question that I think will really resonate well with you, and it's around working remotely. So if you're an EA that works remote, and what strategies do you have to kind of spend time or kind of build that relationship when you get to spend no real physical time with the person you're supporting?
Yes, I know this well. For my entire career with Simon, we were a virtual team. Now, I did travel with him, so I did get to be in a physical presence more often. But with my entire team, we were virtual. So a few things that we did: we rarely, if ever, used the telephone. Whenever it was during business hours and we needed to talk to each other, we would get on Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever video platform you would use, so we can build relationship by seeing each other's faces. And it didn't matter if I didn't have makeup on, if I'm in a sweatshirt, if you're in your at-home yoga gear, doesn't matter. It's building relationship. It's seeing the human behind it. I would highly encourage video conferencing as opposed to telephone, as opposed to definitely not text message. God forbid, paragraph text messages drive me nuts. That is for a phone conversation or a video conversation. And you need to spend more time building relationship. Add in moments where you can find out more about the human. Add in a few moments at the beginning to ask about their daughter's birthday party or their mom's birthday party or what their vacation, and relate to it. Oh, I had the same thing happen. I totally get it. Building the relationship. It's harder to do it remotely, and you have to be more intentional about it. Writing cards, that sort of thing, and video conferencing, without a doubt.
Monique, we've had several questions about this idea around recognition. And I think most people agree with you that you have to expect very limited recognition from your executive. But is there any way that you can try to shed some light to your executive on the amount of work and the difficulty in the work that an executive assistant does, just to try to enhance some level of recognition? I mean, is there room for that, or do executive assistants really need to just accept the fact that recognition is going to be very limited and move on? I mean, we had several questions about this because I think people felt like they'd love to see more of it. So what are some strategies to, educate your executive around recognition?
Sure. So first you'll have to identify from yourself what you're sourcing yourself from in trying to explain to your executive the difficulties that you go through. If it's to prove, if it's for anything having to relate to prove that you do hard work, you're not sourcing yourself from the right place. If you are sourcing yourself from curiosity, from a place of wanting feedback, from a place of needing clarification, these are very different ways to source yourself from. So first off, make sure you know where that's coming from. Because if you're just showing up to prove that you do stuff, that's all that's really going to come across, and proving never really worked for anyone. But of course, there is room for recognition and celebration. And it's not that it shouldn't be. I mean, trust me, if I could wave my magic wand and have all actually say thank you every third day, trust me, I would do it in a heartbeat, without a doubt. But sometimes we're just going to have to talk with our peers about getting that recognition and honoring that recognition for ourselves. And when you do get some recognition from your boss, this goes back to the star chart. Reward the behaviors that you and discourage the behaviors that you don't want. So you could use an FBI in that instance in a positive way. Jack, last week when you took my hand after the board meeting and told me how much you appreciated everything that went into it, man, that just made me feel so seen and so heard. And it makes me want to do a better job for you every single time we have a board meeting. And what's going to happen from that is I'm just going to keep trying harder. You have no idea how much that meant to me. Use an FBI. Tell them that it means a lot to you. And if they're listening, they will try to do it more. Consistently reward the behavior that you want to see and ignore the behavior that you don't.
Monique, we've had several questions about how your title came about when you were working with Simon. I believe your title was it Chief of Simon?
Yes.
So I think people are curious about how that title came about versus just, executive assistant.
Sure. I was lucky enough to be able to choose my own title. Not every executive is willing to do that. I totally understand that that might not be the what could happen in your office, but I was actually given the ability to choose my title. And executive assistant to me didn't fit with all of the skills that I needed to do and some of the projects that I was going to be working on. It just didn't really match up. And I used producer for a little. That's what I did. I was chief of the human. I did everything that the human needed in order to be the best version of that human. So it just sort of made sense to do Chief of Simon. Cool titles out there though, like there's some that have like expletives in it, but doer of all things. I once got a business card from a girl that said doer of all things. I've seen some pretty interesting ones over the years. Baller. I had one girl give me a card and her title was baller and shot caller. So if you're in a corporate environment, you probably need a spicier title or a more regulated title. But if you have the ability, spice it up.
Monique, can you elaborate on offensive and defensive teams?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you elaborate on offensive and defensive teams, which I think you mentioned during your presentation?
Sure. Teams that you work with, I'm assuming that means, like other teams that you're working with that are showing those traits?
Correct.
Yeah. Again, if I could wave my magic wand and we could control the behaviors of everyone else with our little Sega joystick, that would be awesome. However, we live in a world and we live in an environment where you cannot control all those behaviors. All you can do is control your own behavior, and all you can control is the output and what you're going to do about it. So I'm going to go back to it. Reward the behaviors that you want to see. When people are getting defensive, defensiveness is usually something that happens when someone is feeling extremely insecure. So that could be an opportunity for you to show your leadership skills by going up to the person who was very defensive in a meeting and saying, hey, hey, Samantha, like I heard what you were doing in that meeting, and that wasn't like you. That's very, it's a different thing that I have seen from you. So is there something going on? Are you okay? Are you all right? What is happening? I want to be here for you. On a personal level, connecting and showing your leadership skills. Now, if it's offensive, that is completely different in my book. If someone is calling you names, being offensive to you, any of those things, that is a part where you do not have to stand for no matter what. And don't. If someone in your team, or especially if your executive is being mean to you, I'm saying this right now, get out. There are plenty of jobs out there that we could fulfill. We can do everything, people. We are the masters of everything. We can find something else. You are never to put up with someone who's being offensive to you, ever. And that's, if that is happening, that's where you can use one of those FBIs. On Tuesday, when you called me that name, it made me feel blank, 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 blank. And my fear is, if you keep doing that, I'm never going to want to sit in a room with you again, blank, 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 blank. Use your FBI and communicate. And don't stand for it, period.
Monique, this will be our final question. We've had several people send somewhat very specific questions around things that we hear all the time around, I've made suggestions, I've asked questions, and my executive doesn't trust me, or my executive isn't changing old habits, and I've given it years, or I've, gone through many of the things that you've suggested. So my question for you is, when do you decide it's time to move on?
When do you decide it's time to move on? Okay. If you feel that you've gone through everything that you can go through in order to try and make it the most successful partnership that you could, and really go deep in that question, have you done everything? Really, really? Have you sat down in their office and said to their face, I feel that I've been showing you trust by this, this, and this, but it seems to me that you don't trust me. And I would like to know why. Might we have a discussion about this? Might we try and figure out where this is coming from? There's a lot of other communication tactics that we can use before we walk away. Now, if it is the time, how do you know? That really is a personal thing. And that's going to be when your heart and your self-doubt is being crushed. When you feel that you are no longer worthy because something is not happening, when you feel that you are not worth it, when all of those things start happening, when you start to not become the person that you could be, that's when it's time to leave and it's time to move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. Relationships end, whether that's personal or professional, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, about just saying it is just time to move on, and then find what you need.
Monique, I'd really like to express my gratitude to you today for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. And we had so many questions that unfortunately we're unable to get to, but they're brilliant questions. And so is it okay, Monique, with I see your email up on the screen there. If people have specific questions that they'd like your advice on, is it okay for them to reach out to you directly?
Sure, absolutely. Reach out and I will schedule likely a video conference.
Fantastic. So thank you again, Monique, and for really all of the work you're doing to progress the administrative career and profession. And before we sign off, I just have a few final reminders. Our next webinar will take place on February 12th, where Patrick Healy, who is the president of New York Celebrity Assistants, and Kelly Engstrom, who is the executive assistant to Nate Burkus, they're going to talk about how you really optimize leadership in your role as an executive assistant. I hope everyone has enjoyed today's webinar, and a final thank you to everyone for joining us and participating. We hope you have a great week, and I wish you continued success. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.